Today I'm going to demonstrate how to remove paint and varnish in preparation for refinishing wood. This technique can be used for a variety of reasons, such as refinishing old furniture, or today I'm going to be refinishing some old trim work from my home. Other ways we can use this technique is for refinishing doors or windows, or small things such as picture frames or jewelry boxes. Before we get started, we want to take a few safety precautions. We want to make sure we're in a well-ventilated area. We also want to make sure we have proper safety gear, such as the proper apparel and things such as safety glasses, gloves if appropriate, and we want to make sure we have a completely covered work surface so that we don't damage anything around us. That may include covering the floor if necessary. I'm in a basement in my workshop, so what I have here today is sufficient. I've added this piece of plywood to cover my table, and that's all I will need today. There are a couple different options for removing paint from wooden surfaces. We can use a mechanical process using something like a paint scraper or an abrasive wheel on a drill. You could also use a wire brush. You could also use a heat gun such as this to heat up the surface, and then again with a mechanical method by scraping it. Or you can use a chemical process, which what I'm going to do today. There are a few options there as well. These are available at your local hardware store or paint center. There's a product called Zip Strip. There's other variations of this product. And this is a very aggressive paint remover. What I recommend is this product called Soy Gel. Actually, it's been renamed 600 GL. It used to be called Soy Gel. This is a little more of a safe product. It is soy based. It doesn't have near the amount of fumes, and you don't have to take as many safety precautions such as gloves or worrying about it getting on your clothing. It's just a much more user-friendly product. To get started, like I said, I'm going to take some safety precautions. So I'm going to put on my safety glasses. And it's a pretty simple process to get started. We want to start by removing any nails or any other items that might cause any problems when we're doing this. So on trim work especially, I recommend pulling the nails out through the back. The reason we do that is so that we don't get any blowout on the front, such as in this piece. If we were to pound the nail through, it can split out your wood. So I'm going to start by pulling out this nail. And now we can get started. What soy gel does is it starts to break down the paint and varnish on this wood. What we're going to do is start by applying a liberal coat, make sure we're coating the entire surface, and that way it just encapsulates the whole work area. Now, as a precaution, you want to remember that any home or any product painted prior to 1978 has the potential for lead in the material that you're removing. My home was built in 1904, so there is a pretty good chance that one of these layers of paint includes lead on it. The nice thing about soy gel is that it is made in a way that it encapsulates that lead and makes it safe for removal, so it's not bringing these fumes into the air. So there's no good chance of ingesting that lead. So I'm going to start by using a brush, which is one of the methods that you can do. You can also use a scraper to put it on, or a squeegee. I found that just a cheap brush works the best for me. I also pour my soy gel into a container that's easy to handle. So I use an old coffee mug with a nice handle on it, and it's a good size. So you want to make sure you coat the entire surface to get the entire painted surface that we're going to be stripping. And since this piece is painted, it's going to take a pretty generous coat to remove all of this in one pass. So I'm going to coat this entire surface, making sure that I get in all the grooves. Now we're going to let that sit for a little bit. I'm also going to coat the surface of this varnished piece. Now since there's looks like only about one layer or maybe 2 layers of varnish on here, so I don't have to be as generous with this coat, but I do want to make sure I coat the entire surface so that it doesn't dry out. If your workpiece does dry out, it does make it a little bit more difficult to remove. Now that I've coated these surfaces, I'm going to let this product dwell. Now dwell times vary depending on how much material you're trying to remove. I found that with this product, I've been able to let it dwell up to 12 hours and it's had maximum effect. On something that has just maybe 1 or 2 layers of coating on it, you may be able to start scraping and taking off that finish in as little as 1 to 2 hours. It's just always a good idea to come back and check your product. You can use a putty knife just to start to lift an edge to see where you're at. What you'll notice is that when the product starts to work, you'll start to see this effect where it looks like an alligator skin and it starts to really bubble up. And that's when you know this product is working and is starting to remove that paint. So what I'm going to do is just let this sit for a while and we'll come back and start to remove the paint and varnish. Now that I've given this product an opportunity to work, I can start to remove this paint and varnish on these 2 pieces. I can do that in a couple different ways. I've selected a couple different tools to use. I have a plastic putty knife and a metal putty knife. You have to be careful with your metal putty knives. If they have sharp edges, you don't want to gouge or damage your wood. In my case, these are going to need some patching anyway, so I can be a little bit more aggressive with a metal scraper. But if you have some delicate woodwork, you want to be careful and just use something plastic just so you don't damage anything. Take some extra precaution. So it's like I said, it's a pretty simple process. You can just use this scraper to start removing the varnish on this piece here. And I can do that by just going over the surface a few times with this scraper. And what you'll do is you'll start to see that this material is coming off fairly easily. Now what I have over here is just an old box. It's a good idea to just keep something that you can later throw away. Again, you want to be really careful with mixing any chemicals. So I've used this box before for this process, so I know that it's safe to dispose in this manner. And I've also let this sit out and dry for a while so this old material is hardened up to make it safe for disposal. Now you'll notice that this piece of trim has a little bit of detail here, so you may have to find another tool to get in those smaller crevices. Sometimes something as simple as an old nail will work, where you can just get in there and kind of scratch out those small areas. I've used other tools such as files or even toothbrushes to kind of scrape that out. There's just a number of ways you can get creative to start to remove this old paint and varnish. Now, this varnish piece you start to see what the original wood looked like, and it's really satisfying. But when you get to something that's been painted a number of times, this may have been painted 5 or 6 times, you really can start to see the effects of how this product works. So I'm going to use a little bit bigger scraper just for the dramatic effect here. You can see I'm taking off all that paint in almost one pass here. Now, since there's a potential that this is lead-based paint, I just want to point out that you don't want to sand or do anything that would create any lead dust that you could ingest. Doing this process, this product really encapsulates that lead and it makes it a lot safer for removal. Again, after I'm done, I want to wash my hands thoroughly just to make sure I don't have any of that residue left on my hands. Now to finish up, I'm going to continue to scrape these, and when I'm done with that, I'm going to possibly use just a little bit of an aggressive brush to get all the remaining paint off. If necessary, you may recoat. If you have some stubborn areas where there's still paint, it's okay to come back and put some more product on it. And again, just let that dwell for a little bit and come back and you can scrape it off later. When you have most of the paint and varnish removed, you're ready to move to the next step. That would be cleaning up this surface, making sure we get all that residual paint, and we want to make sure that we get our product off of there as well so that our paint or varnish or however we're going to refinish this adheres to the surface. So I'm going to do that by using a real mild degreaser, and I can spray that directly on the surface. And I'm going to use what's called a Scotch-Brite pad. It's mildly abrasive, and I'm just going to work that on the surface here and just start to scrub away the residual paint and the residual chemical that we use to remove the paint. Now again, this is a water-soluble product, so we can also use soap or water, such as dish soap. You just don't want to get this product or your wood too wet because you're going to start to make the grain raise and you might have some undesired results. Once you have your entire surface clean, you're going to want to set this aside and let it dry for a good 12 to 24 hours. After your wood surface is dried, you can move on to the next step toward refinishing your project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill any holes or imperfections using a wood filler, and these come in a variety of ways as well. You can have some that match your wood. You can have some, for example, this is for a dark tone wood. They have some that match pine or oak or even cherry, and you have some that are just a neutral color that can be stained over. For my purpose, I'm going to be repainting all these pieces, so I found that just a general wood patch works for my purpose, and really it doesn't matter what color I'm using. So you use that, you fill in your holes. You can apply this with your finger, you can apply it with a putty knife to fill in those holes and imperfections. And then you can, once that sets up and dries, you can move on to the next step, which is sanding and preparing your surface for paint. I think that's it.